The door creaked before I heard his voice. "Daniel?" It was the sound of my father's voice that froze me, not the click of the doorknob. I didn't even have time to hide. I just stood there, in the middle of the bedroom mirror's reflection, wearing one of Mom's dresses. The blue one she kept for special occasions, the one I'd always watched her wear with quiet awe. My hands trembled as I gripped the fabric, the soft satin pressing against my skin like proof of something I couldn't explain away. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. He stopped in the doorway. His face shifted through confusion, disbelief, and something unreadable, shock, maybe. For a moment, time seemed to forget how to move. I can explain. I stammered, though the words didn't even sound real. There was no explanation that made sense, not one that could fill the heavy silence between us. He blinked slowly, then looked at the mirror, the reflection of his son standing where he'd expected no one to be. "Daniel," he said again, softer this time, like he was trying to understand what he was seeing rather than what he wanted to see. The air in the room was so still I could hear my own shallow breathing. I started, but the sentence collapsed in my throat. What could I say? That I was curious? That it felt right in a way nothing else ever had? That I'd been sneaking into this room for months just to feel a version of myself I couldn't name? He took a step forward, slow and hesitant. "Take a breath, son," he said quietly. His voice wasn't angry. That was almost worse. I looked down at the fabric in my hands, then at my reflection again. Long lashes from Mom's old mascara. My hair brushed differently, my posture delicate, uncertain. It wasn't just dress up. It never had been. The realization hit me like a wave I'd been standing in for years without noticing I was sinking. My father sighed, his eyes moving between me and the mirror. "Does your mother know?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, please don't tell her. I needed to know what it felt like." He didn't answer right away. His gaze softened slightly, but there was something heavy in it too, a storm trying to stay contained. "Daniel," he said finally, "you're my child. That doesn't change." He paused. "But I don't understand this. Not yet." Tears prickled behind my eyes. I wanted to disappear, to melt back into the air before this moment existed. He turned toward the door, but stopped before leaving. "Take your time to change," he said quietly. "We'll talk later." When he left, the silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was alive, buzzing with everything unsaid. I sank to the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection through blurred vision. I thought being caught would destroy me, but what scared me more was the strange calm underneath my panic. The dress still felt like mine. The reflection still looked like me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every word, every glance, every heartbeat from that moment replayed endlessly. Somewhere deep down, I knew something had changed, not just between me and my father, but inside me too. For the first time, I couldn't pretend this was just curiosity. It was truth trying to breathe. The next morning, the house felt like it had forgotten how to speak. The air was heavy, still, filled with the quiet hum of thoughts no one dared to say aloud. I could hear my father downstairs, his usual morning routine, the sound of the coffee maker, the news murmuring softly in the background, but every sound felt slightly distorted, like I was listening from behind glass. I stared at my reflection again in the bathroom mirror, this time dressed in my usual clothes. T-shirt, jeans. Nothing special. Nothing that belonged to me. The reflection looked hollow. Every time I blinked, I saw the other version of myself from the night before. The one in the blue dress. The one that felt alive. The one who had looked at the mirror not with shame, but recognition. And then, as if on cue, the smell of coffee drifted up the stairs. It was his silent signal, his way of saying, "Come down when you're ready." My stomach churned. When I finally walked downstairs, he was sitting at the kitchen table, one hand wrapped around his mug, the other resting on a newspaper he wasn't actually reading. He looked up when I entered, eyes searching my face for something. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely more than a whisper. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Then he set the mug down. I didn't sleep much, he admitted. Been thinking. I swallowed hard. About last night? He nodded. About you. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I know. He sighed. You were scared. I could see that. I wasn't just scared. I said before I could stop myself. I was embarrassed. But not because of what I was doing. Because I knew you wouldn't understand. He didn't flinch, but his gaze softened. You're right, he said slowly. I don't understand. I've spent all night trying to find the right way to react. I kept thinking, was this a phase? Curiosity? But the way you looked, that wasn't confusion. That was something else. It was me, I said quietly. He leaned back in his chair. I could tell. For a moment, I almost smiled, but the ache in my chest was too sharp. I know this isn't what you expected. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. He frowned. Don't say that. You haven't disappointed me. You just surprised me. And I'm trying to figure out what that means. I could feel tears threatening again. It's not like I planned this. It's just when I put on her clothes, I finally feel real. Like the person I see in the mirror isn't pretending anymore. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. When I was your age, he began, I tried on my father's suit once. It was way too big for me, sleeves hanging off my arms. But I remember standing in front of the mirror thinking, this is who I'll become one day. He paused. Maybe that's what you were doing too, finding who you'll become. Just differently. I stared at him. Words caught in my throat. He gave a small, tired smile. I might not get it all right away. But you're my kid. That doesn't change. Something in me cracked open at that. Not from pain, but from relief. When he stood to leave for work, he paused at the door and looked back. Maybe we don't need to hide this from your mother, he said carefully. But only when you're ready. I nodded, tears silently falling. After he left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the sun spilling through the window. For the first time, it didn't feel like it was burning me. It felt like it was warming something that had been frozen for years. He didn't understand everything, but he was trying. And somehow, that was enough for now. For a few days, the house felt almost normal again, at least on the surface. Dad went to work, Mom kept busy in the garden, and I did what I always did, helped around, went online, stayed quiet. But beneath that routine, something new was growing, something delicate but steady, like the space between me and my father had softened somehow. Still, I carried the secret carefully. Mom didn't know, or at least I thought she didn't. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. She was cleaning the upstairs rooms while I was in the garage helping Dad fix the old lawnmower. The house smelled faintly of detergent and lemon polish, and somewhere down the hall, the faint hum of Mom's old radio played a love song from her youth. I remember Dad asking me to fetch a wrench from the top shelf, and just as I climbed up, I heard it, her voice calling my name. Sharp, urgent. Daniel. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering onto the concrete floor. Dad looked up, startled, but before I could say anything, Mom appeared at the top of the stairs holding something. My heart stopped. It was the blue dress. That blue dress. Folded neatly over her arm like a piece of evidence. I found this in your room, she said, her voice steady but too calm. Do you want to explain? Dad froze. His eyes darted between us, uncertain whether to intervene or stay silent. Mom, I began, but she held up her hand. Not here. Come upstairs. Her tone left no room for argument. I followed her up, my legs weak, my pulse pounding in my ears. The walls of the house seemed smaller than usual, closing in with every step. When we reached her room, she turned to me and placed the dress gently on the bedspread, smoothing it out with her hand. I know this isn't about curiosity, she said quietly. I know because I've seen the way you look in the mirror when you think no one's watching. I froze, heat rising in my face. You saw me? She nodded slowly. Not that night. Before. A few times, actually. I didn't say anything, because I thought you'd come to me when you were ready. I felt the ground tilt under me. I was scared. Her expression softened, though there was a sadness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Of me? No, I whispered. Of losing you. That broke her. She took a step closer and reached out, cupping my cheek gently. Oh, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling. You could never lose me. I just didn't know how to ask. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd imagined every possible reaction from her: anger, confusion, maybe even disgust, but not this. Not quiet, aching love. I thought maybe it was something else, she continued. A phase, a game. But then I saw how careful you were, how you'd hang everything back, how you'd check your reflection like you were meeting someone you missed. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. It wasn't about pretending, was it? I shook my head. No, it never was. Her hands fell to her sides, trembling slightly. Does your father know? Yes, I admitted. He caught me last week. She blinked, surprised. And he didn't yell. He just said he doesn't understand yet. A small smile tugged at her lips. That sounds like him. We stood there for a long moment, silence filling the space between us. Not heavy this time, but full. Then she picked up the blue dress again and held it toward me. Try it on, she said softly. My breath caught. Now. She nodded. Now. I want to see you as you see yourself. Hands trembling, I slipped behind the curtain and changed. The satin brushed against my skin like a familiar voice whispering, "It's okay." When I stepped out, her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes glistened, and she exhaled shakily. You look peaceful, she said finally. I did. I felt it, too. She crossed the room, adjusted the neckline a little, smoothed the fabric on my shoulders. You've been carrying this alone for too long, she whispered. You don't have to anymore. When she hugged me, I cried. Quietly, deeply. Not from shame this time, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. Downstairs, I could hear Dad moving around, pretending not to notice the time that passed. Maybe he knew this was a moment that needed to happen without him. That night, Mom knocked softly on my door before bed. I put a few things in your closet, she said gently. They might fit better than mine. And when she left, I opened it to find a small box. Some old scarves, a few blouses she didn't wear anymore, a hairbrush, and a note on top that simply read, "For when you need to feel like yourself." I sat on my bed and cried again, clutching the note to my chest. For the first time in my life, for a while, it felt like peace had finally arrived in our home. There was no yelling, no tense silence, no glances filled with suspicion. Just this strange, gentle quiet that wrapped around us like a fragile truce. Dad didn't bring it up, Mom didn't pry, and I found myself breathing a little easier each day. But peace can be deceptive. It isn't always the absence of conflict. It's sometimes just the calm before it finds new ways to test you. It started with the neighbors. Mrs. Donnelly, the woman next door, had this uncanny ability to notice everything. The kind who always watered her plants just as someone was walking past her gate, who made harmless comments that never really were. One Saturday morning, as I stepped out to take the trash to the curb, wearing one of Mom's loose cardigans and soft jeans that fit me just a little too well, I caught her eyes lingering. "Good morning, dear," she said, tilting her head. New look. Her tone was sweet, but her gaze was searching. I mumbled something about borrowing from Mom and ducked back inside, heart racing. I could practically feel her thoughts chasing after me like shadows. When I told Mom, she sighed and gave me that look, the one halfway between sympathy and caution. "You don't owe her an explanation," she said, brushing my hair back from my face. "But the world notices things. And not everyone will be kind about it." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I fully understood what she meant until the following week. Dad had been quieter than usual lately. Not cold, just quieter, like his thoughts had grown heavier. I caught him sometimes staring out the window longer than he used to, his coffee cooling in his hands. One evening, he came into my room while I was sitting at my desk brushing my hair. "You're keeping it long now," he said, his voice low. I turned to my chair, setting the brush down carefully. "Yeah." Mom said it suits me. He nodded almost mechanically. It does. Then, after a pause, when I was your age, I didn't even know how to talk to my father about a haircut. I smiled faintly. Times change. Yeah, he murmured. They do. He hesitated at the doorway before finally adding, Your mom says you're happier lately. I looked down at my hands. I think I am. He studied me for a moment, and for the first time since that night he caught me, he smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a flicker, but it carried something real in it. That's good, he said softly. That's really good. I wanted to say thank you, to tell him what that meant to me, but before I could, he'd already turned away, muttering something about checking the garage. Still, I sat there long after he left, holding on to that faint, flickering moment like a promise. Then came school. Even though I was out of uniform most days now, studying from home after transferring to an online program, there were still times I had to go in for exams or meetings. And on one of those days, I made the mistake of letting a bit of me show. A soft pink hoodie, light mascara. Just enough to feel right, not enough to draw attention, or so I thought. But I'd underestimated how sharp teenage eyes can be. Hey, someone called in the hallway. Nice hoodie, bro. The tone wasn't mocking exactly, but it carried that edge. A few heads turned. Whispers started. The rest of the day blurred into a quiet ache of self-awareness. I could feel eyes following me, each one like a small needle pressing against the fragile new skin of my confidence. When I came home, Mom knew instantly something was wrong. I didn't even have to say it. They noticed, didn't they? She asked softly. I nodded, blinking fast. I just wanted to feel like myself. But maybe I shouldn't have. She sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. Sweetheart, you can't hide from who you are forever. Not without losing pieces of yourself along the way. Her words echoed in my head that night as I stared at the ceiling. I thought about how much I'd already lost by hiding, and how much more I stood to lose if I stopped. And then, something unexpected happened the next day. Dad came home early. He had a small shopping bag in his hand and looked uncharacteristically nervous. He stood in the doorway of my room for a long moment before setting the bag on my desk. I was at the store, he said, scratching the back of his neck. Your mom said you were running out of whatever this is. He gestured vaguely at my brush and hair ties, avoiding eye contact. Inside the bag were a few new hair clips, a small mirror, and, of all things, a light lavender nail polish. I stared at it, my throat tightening. You bought these? He shrugged. The lady at the counter helped. I told her they were for my kid. My heart swelled and ached at the same time. Dad. He waved me off, embarrassed. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just keep being careful, okay? I nodded, smiling through tears I didn't even realize were falling. That night, I painted my nails for the first time, hands trembling but heart steady. The color shimmered softly in the lamplight, lavender, delicate and calm, like a quiet kind of courage. When I showed Mom, she grinned. Looks perfect. And for the first time, I believed her. The lavender on my nails stayed for weeks, not because I didn't want to remove it, but because I couldn't bring myself to. Every time I looked down and saw that faint, soft shimmer, it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years. Acceptance. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't total, but it was real. Mom said nothing more about it. She just smiled when she noticed, helped me learn how to apply it better, even bought me a small nail file kit of my own. Dad, on the other hand, seemed to pretend it didn't exist, though every now and then I caught his eyes flicker toward my hands, just for a moment, before he'd look away quickly, pretending he hadn't seen. But life doesn't stay still when you start changing. Once you allow a piece of yourself to breathe, the rest of you starts gasping for air too. One evening, while folding laundry, I found myself holding one of Mom's old blouses. It was soft, faintly floral, the kind of thing I used to just admire in secret. But now I didn't feel the same fear. I hesitated for only a second before slipping it on. It fit perfectly. I stood before the mirror, the fabric resting gently against my skin, and something inside me just clicked. I didn't see a boy trying to play dress up. I saw a softer, quieter reflection of myself that had always been there, waiting. That's when the front door opened. I froze. Dad was home early again. I heard the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, the low murmur of his voice as he called out for Mom. Panic raced through me. I started to pull the blouse off, but my hands were shaking too hard. My mind screamed for me to run, to hide, to erase what I'd just done, but my feet wouldn't move. The door opened before I could react.
He stopped.
I stopped. The air between us turned to glass. He looked at me, at the blouse, at my painted nails, at the fear frozen on my face. For a second, he didn't say anything. His expression wasn't anger exactly, it was confusion, hurt, and something else, something like recognition. "Why?" he asked finally. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I started, but my voice broke. "I don't know. It just feels right." He took a slow breath, eyes locked on me. "Feels right," he repeated softly, like he was trying to understand the words. Neither of us spoke for what felt like forever. The ticking clock in the hallway sounded deafening. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps faded. Then the door clicked shut. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, staring at my reflection, feeling like I'd crossed an invisible line I could never step back over. When Mom came home later, I told her what happened. She didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any we'd shared before. "He needs time," she whispered. "You're showing him a part of life he's never understood. But time has a way of softening things." I wanted to believe her. For days afterward, Dad didn't say a word about it. He spoke to me, yes, about school, groceries, small things, but never about that night. His voice stayed calm, his eyes neutral. But the silence beneath it all was thick enough to choke on. Until one morning, about a week later, I was eating breakfast when he came into the kitchen, car keys in hand. "We need to go somewhere," he said. My heart dropped. "Go where?" He didn't answer, just nodded toward the door. "You'll see." The drive was quiet. My mind raced through possibilities. Was he taking me to a counselor? A relative? Someone to fix me? But when we stopped, I looked up and realized where we were. A small clothing store. Not fancy, not huge. Just normal. He got out, circled around, and opened my door. "Your mom said you needed something that actually fits," he said simply. I stared at him, unable to form words. You brought me here?" He gave a small, almost awkward nod. "If this is who you are, then you should at least have something that's yours, not hers." My throat tightened, so much it hurt. Inside, I was a whirlwind of disbelief, gratitude, fear, and love all crashing together. I wanted to speak, to thank him, but the only thing that came out was a choked, "Dad." He looked away, his voice rough. "Just pick something you like, okay?" And that was the moment. Standing in that tiny store with my father, both of us pretending not to notice the tears in each other's eyes, that I realized something. He didn't just catch me in Mom's clothes that night. He caught me in the middle of becoming who I was meant to be. And though he didn't understand it, he was trying to. That was the beginning of our real story. The small bag from that shop sat on my dresser for 3 whole days before I even opened it. Every time I looked at it, I felt the same rush of warmth and fear twist together in my chest. Inside were just a few simple things: a blouse that actually fit me, a soft cardigan, and a pair of jeans cut just a bit differently than what I used to wear. But to me, that bag wasn't just fabric and thread. It was proof that someone had chosen to see me, even when they didn't fully understand who I was. Mom kept telling me to take my time, to wear them when it felt right. But time doesn't make courage come any faster. Courage comes like breath, shaky, hesitant, but necessary. It happened one quiet Sunday afternoon. The air smelled like rain, and the house was unusually silent. Mom was out gardening, Dad was fixing something in the garage, and for once, I didn't hear the constant hum of judgment in my head. I looked at the bag again and whispered, "Today." My hands trembled as I pulled out the clothes. The fabric was light and smelled faintly of the store, new, clean, and full of potential. When I put the blouse on, it fit perfectly across my shoulders, flowing just enough to feel gentle but not foreign. The cardigan added a layer of comfort, almost like armor. I paired it with the jeans and took one last long look in the mirror. I didn't see a stranger anymore. I saw the same me, but softer, freer, like someone who'd finally stepped into their own skin instead of running from it. I walked outside before I could talk myself out of it. The sun had just broken through the clouds, scattering warm light across the yard. Mom noticed me first. Her hands paused mid-motion in the dirt as she looked up and smiled. That same smile she'd worn the first time she painted my nails. No surprise, no hesitation. Just quiet pride. Dad was behind her, holding a wrench, his expression unreadable for a second. My heart stuttered, then softened when I saw the faintest curve of a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "You're braver than I was at your age," he said, voice steady. Those words hit harder than anything I'd ever heard. We didn't need a long conversation. That small sentence held everything I'd been desperate for: acknowledgement, acceptance, love. Not perfect, not complete, but real. That night, I stood in my room, brushing my hair out in the mirror. For the first time, I wasn't scared of who I might become. I realized that transformation wasn't about changing into someone new. It was about revealing someone who had been there all along, buried under years of fear and expectations. But freedom has its own price. The next day, when I walked into school wearing just a trace of eyeliner and a blouse that was mine, whispers followed me. Some were quiet, some not. Laughter echoed behind me like ghosts. But even with every glance, every whisper, I kept walking. Because for the first time, I wasn't walking as someone pretending. That night, Dad waited for me in the kitchen when I came home. "Rough day?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded.
"Yeah."
He looked thoughtful for a moment. "People fear what they don't understand," he said finally. "But you keep being you. One day, they'll see the strength in that." I smiled, small but sincere. "You really think so?" "I know so." That night, lying in bed, I thought about those words. How strange it was that the man who once didn't know how to speak to me now said exactly what I needed to hear. How a single act of courage, being caught in Mom's clothes, had set off a chain of moments that were slowly stitching my life back together in a new pattern. And in that soft darkness, before I fell asleep, one thought repeated quietly in my head: maybe being caught was the best thing that ever happened to me. The first time someone from school saw me outside of school, really saw me, was at the grocery store on a sleepy Saturday morning. I wasn't even dressed in anything dramatic, just the cardigan Mom had bought me, a soft blue top, and my favorite jeans. To anyone else, I probably looked like a shy, quiet girl blending into the background. But to me, that outfit meant stepping into a world that wasn't ready to understand me. Mom had asked me to come along to help her with errands, and I told myself I could handle it. I told myself no one would notice. But the second we walked past the front doors, the air felt heavier, charged with invisible eyes. I kept my head down, clutching the basket as we moved through the aisles, trying to breathe normally. Then I heard it, my name. Daniel? It was Jason. A friend, or at least he used to be. We'd played video games together for years, laughing through late nights and pizza boxes. He was holding a bottle of soda, frozen mid-step, eyes wide. For a split second, neither of us said anything. The store noise faded into a dull hum. I wanted to vanish, but Mom put a gentle hand on my back, steadying me. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded faintly, though my throat was dry. "Yeah, I finally managed." "Hey, Jason." My voice came out softer than usual, shaky, but steady enough to sound real. He blinked, then his mouth twitched, not into a smile, but something close to confusion. "I almost didn't recognize you," he said. "You look different." "I guess I am," I said quietly. Mom glanced between us, but didn't say a word. She just moved ahead, giving me space I didn't even know I needed. Jason shifted awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "So, is this like a thing now?" he asked, voice low but cautious. Not mocking, not mean, just uncertain. I took a breath. "It's not a thing," I said, looking him in the eye. "It's just me." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "Okay. Just surprised, that's all." He paused, then gave me the smallest grin. "Still planning to join the next tournament?" I almost laughed, partly from relief, partly from disbelief. "Yeah," I said. "Of course." He smiled wider. "Cool. You were always the best support anyway." As he walked off, I stood there for a moment, heart racing, but something in me felt lighter. I'd braced myself for rejection, laughter, or worse, but what I got instead was something small but powerful, a reminder that the world wasn't made entirely of judgment. Some people would see me and just keep walking with me, no questions asked. In the car ride home, Mom glanced over and said, "You handled that beautifully." I was terrified, I admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," she said softly. "It's moving anyway." When I got home that night, I looked at myself in the mirror again. My reflection didn't seem like an imposter anymore. It was someone who had faced the world and hadn't broken apart. Someone who could exist and still be seen. That night, I realized something important. Transformation doesn't happen in secret. It happens when you dare to exist in the light, even when you're shaking. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally learning how to live there. The days after that grocery store encounter were filled with a strange mix of liberation and tension. I walked through life with a little more courage, but every step outside my comfort zone seemed to carry an invisible weight. Each glance, each whisper, became a test of whether I could maintain the calm I was slowly learning to wear like armor. One Wednesday, it all came to a head. It started like any other day. I had a math quiz that morning, a quiet test in a room that always smelled faintly of old books and pencil shavings. My favorite cardigan draped comfortably over my shoulders, my hair neatly brushed, nails still lavender from the week before. I felt ready. Or, at least, I thought I did. As I entered the classroom, I caught the eyes of a few classmates. Some were curious, some surprised, some whispering. I tried to ignore them, taking my seat and opening my notebook. But then it happened. A paper airplane sailed across the room, landing squarely on my desk. The class erupted in muffled giggles. I unfolded it slowly. Written in messy, bold letters were the words. "Since when did Daniel start dressing like this?" I froze. My pencil hovered above the page. My pulse pounded. Then I felt it, a sharp tug in my chest. The urge to disappear, to shrink into the chair, to erase every inch of myself from the world. I wanted to vanish. But then something deeper inside me stirred. I looked around the room, catching the eyes of those who whispered. They were waiting for a reaction. They wanted a show, but I didn't give them one. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Yeah," I said quietly but firmly. "Since always." The words felt strange leaving my lips, but there was no shame in them. I straightened in my chair, my reflection in the polished wooden desk catching my eyes, steady, alive, unashamed. A few gasps floated through the room. Some students snickered nervously, unsure what to make of it. But I could feel a subtle shift. The energy of fear and judgment had no power over me anymore. After class, a few classmates approached. One of them, Mia, a quiet girl who usually sat in the back, said softly, "I didn't know, but I think it's cool that you can be yourself." "Thanks," I whispered, barely able to smile, but smiling anyway. Later that evening, I recounted the day to Mom and Dad. They listened, Mom squeezing my hand gently, Dad nodding quietly. "I was proud of you today," Mom said, "even if it felt scary." Dad added, "You stood up for yourself in a way I never could have at your age. That's brave." I realized then that acceptance wasn't just about being seen at home, or even by friends. It was about being able to exist fully, even when the world wasn't ready. That night, I stood in my room, looking at the lavender polish on my nails, the cardigan I loved, the reflection in the mirror. For the first time, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. I had faced judgment, curiosity, and whispers, and I had survived. More than survived. I had grown. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a quiet but undeniable truth. My transformation wasn't just external. It was inside me now, in my bones, in the courage that I had claimed for myself. The road ahead would still be hard. There would still be stares, questions, and moments that made my heart race. But now I knew one thing. I didn't have to shrink anymore. I didn't have to hide. The day of the school talent show arrived faster than I expected. It wasn't that I planned to perform or be the center of attention. I never had, but somehow, the opportunity found me. One of the teachers, knowing about my love for art and storytelling, asked if I'd present a short piece about personal growth. My stomach churned at the thought. Standing on that stage, in front of the entire student body, would mean showing everyone not just my work, but me. The part of me I'd been hiding for years. Mom noticed my anxiety as I sat at the breakfast table that morning. "You've prepared for this," she said, her voice steady. "Now, it's time to be seen. Be proud of it." Dad added almost shyly, "And whatever happens, you're already brave enough for me." I nodded, clutching the small notebook where I had scribbled my piece. The pages were filled with thoughts, memories, and the little victories I had quietly celebrated over the past months. But reading them aloud to everyone, that felt terrifying. By the time the bell rang and I was backstage, waiting for my turn, I could hear the crowd. The hum of voices, the scrape of chairs, the laughter. All normal, all ordinary, but to me, every sound felt like a spotlight. Then my name was called. I stepped onto the stage, the lights bright and warm against my skin. For a moment, I froze, caught between the desire to run and the need to stand. But then I remembered Mom's words, Dad's quiet support, and my own journey. I took a deep breath and began. "My name is Daniel," I said, voice quivering, "but I've also been discovering the person I've always been inside." I spoke about fear, about hiding, about the nights I spent staring in mirrors and pretending to be someone I wasn't. I spoke about courage, small victories, and the people who saw me even when I was scared. My hands trembled, but I held them steady in front of me, showing the lavender polish that had become my quiet symbol of courage. By the time I finished, the auditorium was silent. Not the kind of silence that smothers, but the kind that listens. I could feel eyes on me, some curious, some surprised, some empathetic. And in that quiet, I felt a shift inside myself. Then came the applause. It started small, a few claps, hesitant but real. Then more students joined in, and soon the entire auditorium was clapping. I couldn't believe it. The whispers, the stares, the fear, they hadn't disappeared, but they had no power over me anymore. I had faced them, and in that moment, I was stronger. Backstage, Mom hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "You were amazing," she whispered. Dad's hand rested on my shoulder, his eyes proud. "I knew you could do it," he said. "I always knew." For the first time, I truly understood something my parents had been trying to teach me all along. Courage isn't just about standing up to the world. It's about standing up to yourself, letting yourself be seen, and refusing to shrink away from the life you're meant to live. And as I walked home that evening, the late sun casting a warm glow over the quiet streets, I realized that my journey was far from over. But for the first time, I felt ready. I was no longer just a boy hiding in clothes that weren't mine. I was someone real, someone proud, someone finally at peace with who I was becoming. It's strange how life can change in small, almost invisible ways, and yet one day, you wake up and realize that everything is different. The lavender polish still glimmers faintly on my nails, my favorite cardigan hangs neatly in my closet, and the reflection in the mirror finally feels like me. Not a boy borrowing his mother's clothes, not a shy shadow hiding behind fears, but me. The weeks after the talent show were quiet, but in that quiet, I grew stronger. School days became less terrifying. Whispers still existed, yes, but they no longer had the power to make me shrink. Some friends reached out, some classmates nodded in quiet acceptance, and a few even complimented my style. Each gesture, each acknowledgement, was a small victory, like sunlight breaking through clouds. At home, the dynamic shifted subtly but profoundly. Dad, once hesitant, now walked past my room and smiled without looking away. He even joked once about borrowing my cardigan, and I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Mom continued to guide me, her encouragement steady and unwavering. Our house no longer felt like a place of tension, but of growth, a sanctuary where I could finally breathe. One evening, I sat by the window, journal in hand, writing about everything I had experienced over the past months. The nervous whispers, the trembling in front of mirrors, the small triumphs, and even the stumbles. I realized my journey wasn't just about clothes or appearances, it was about courage, authenticity, and the quiet bravery it takes to step into yourself fully. I thought about the night Dad caught me in Mom's clothes. That moment, once a source of fear, had become the catalyst for everything I had gained. The fear had forced me to confront myself, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had. Transformation isn't a single moment. It's a collection of choices, small and large, brave and terrifying. It's staying true when the world whispers otherwise. It's finding beauty in your own reflection and refusing to let anyone tell you who you must be. Looking back now, I can see the journey clearly. The trembling first steps in borrowed clothes, the quiet support of my parents, the tentative acceptance of friends, the courage to be seen in public, and finally, the moment I claimed my own identity with confidence. And though there will always be challenges ahead, I know one thing for certain. I am no longer hiding. I am no longer shrinking. I am fully, beautifully, unapologetically myself. Standing there in my room, watching the sunlight dance across my lavender nails, I whisper to my reflection, "Thank you for being patient, for being brave, for letting me become you." And in that quiet, gentle moment, I feel complete. This is not the end of my story. It is simply the beginning of a life lived authentically, courageously, and freely, a life that I can finally call my own.